The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight. Those in the chat room and those listening from around the world. We appreciate each and every one of you. We have a great show lined up tonight. And with us, we have Barbara Duncan.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Jeffrey Gould.
Hello, hello.
And we've got a great guest on with us tonight. We've had him on several times. I've been with him, 4 or 5 times over in Gettysburg, and we always have a great time together. So I'm going to let Jeff introduce our guest.
Yeah, so our returning guest tonight is author Don Allison. He's the recipient of numerous Associated Press and United Press International Awards for his news, feature, and column writing. And he's got his start in journalism when he was a high school student as a sports writer and photographer. He's written extensively on the war between the states, drawing on knowledge gained from a lifetime of study of that conflict. He is the co-founder of Faded Banner Publications, which publishes books on the war between the states and Northwest Ohio history, which is available at Amazon and their own site, fadedbanner.com. So welcome back, Don Allison.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
All right. Well, glad you was able to for a change. You've been pretty busy lately, though, haven't you?
Yeah, I really have. Even with all the issues with the COVID-19, I have been able to keep busy, which I'm very gratified for that.
Well, that is good, because there's a lot of people that's not. and I have been, of course, been renovating our house, and we still got some painting left to do. We've got, they're supposed to be coming to remodel the bathroom and the half bath. We have some of the stuff for it. I don't think they're going to get here though until I think sometime in August. And we've got ordered new doors front and back. So we've got all the flooring in and all the kitchen's done. So we're on our way. It's just taking a longer time to get stuff done with the COVID going on. So
you stirring up any ghosts in that renovation there?
I'm not looking for any.
That was what you asked.
Sometimes they'll come looking for you, I found.
No, I have not had or noticed anything out of the ordinary. I mean, the cat every now and then looks, but haven't heard anything or seen anything, so we're okay for now. So, little background, I guess, of on you. When did you start going over to Gettysburg? And you was going there for the history, not expecting to find anything in the paranormal range, right?
Yeah, that's right, Henry. Actually, the first time I was there, my wife and I, Diane, honeymooned in Gettysburg.
All right.
Luckily, that was her idea. So I thought, wow, I'm marrying the right lady when that was the case. But yeah, and then we didn't go there for several years until one of our anniversaries we went back. And again, it was for the history.
Then how long was it after you had been going over to Gettysburg that you bought this house that you're living in and renovating?
Boy, it was probably close to 25 years after our first trip. to Gettysburg that we bought the house.
So you'd been going to Gettysburg for the history and seeing different things there, not expecting anything paranormal, and you still probably wasn't believing into it so much because you hadn't moved into your house, right?
Yeah, and I really didn't pay attention to speak of to the stories of the paranormal, the hauntings, the activity there. It was strictly the history. I was there a number of times for the reenactments. I've done some living history, and I probably was there for the reenactments more than any other reason until after we bought our house.
So then, how long had you gotten into your house before you started noticing things? And at first, was you just thinking it was an old house creaking and different things like that where you needed to fix stuff?
I actually thought I was maybe losing my mind, and that's really not much of an exaggeration. I mean, the kind of things I was dealing with initially were very clear footsteps. I mean, very clear, and more than one cause of these footsteps. Some sounded to be a young child, barefoot child. Another was someone larger, but still sounded rather light. And then what sounded like a heavy individual with leather boots. From my living history experience, I'm very familiar with that sound. And it was just, that's exactly what I was hearing. And I could not explain that. Not at all.
Now, when you say that you went for the reenactments, were you there just to watch, or were you actually participating in the reenactments?
I actually was a participant. That it's been a good learning experience for me. When you're a reenactor, you're actually, wearing the reproduction uniforms, but they're just like the originals. I even carry an original musket. You're carrying the equipment, you're doing the maneuvers. It's really a great way to understand what the soldiers are doing, and really a good aid if you're going to write about it.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, did the reenactments themselves stir up any supernatural activity while you were there?
They often do. I have heard many stories from people that I don't think would be prone to be making things up. I was lucky enough to be involved in the making of the movie Gettysburg, and where some of the reenactors stayed during that filming was actually the site of a field hospital. One gentleman told me about being pulled out of his tent in the middle of the night. Someone grabbed him under the arms and pulled him out while he was sleeping, and nobody was there.
Wow.
Others told of hearing cries in the woods nearby, and like people calling out, like almost like people looking for, say, wounded comrades, or maybe wounded men, calling for their friends.
Wow.
Now, I did not experience that, but where I stayed was farther away and was not a part of the battlefield or the aftermath.
Okay. So, I mean, but while they're there, they sleep in tents, usually around the battlefield area, that sort of thing, or?
Yeah, for the reenactments, we would stay in reproduction period tents. And at times you're on land that at least would have been traversed by the armies, perhaps passed through, or maybe even camped there. Even perhaps some of the more distant field hospitals, those really any available building for miles around was used as a field hospital.
You'd think that would be like the ultimate trigger object, is to have a lot of people there. I mean, I can't imagine, trying to fire a musket and then realizing that the people next to you aren't really there.
It would be quite a surprise. One of the stories I have heard told is that I think there were 3 gentlemen involved, and they were actually at or near Little Round Top. They had gone there in uniform. I think they were there for a reenactment, but they had worn their uniforms on the battlefield, and they were approached by a very, very realistic-looking soldiers, and their reaction was, "Wow, this guy's done his research. His impression is really amazing." I think he even had powder stains on his face. He told the men, "Wow, it was really hot today, wasn't it?" And they thought he's talking about the weather, and he handed them a cartridge. He said, "Maybe you can use this. I can't," something to that effect. And then he walked away. Well, they got to looking, and this cartridge was not a blank cartridge like the reenactors use. It actually had the lead bullet inside as well.
Wow.
Now, I did not hear this firsthand, talk to the people themselves, but it is a very widely told incident among reenactors.
You said they were firing lead bullets?
In the reenactment, you fire just blank. They're paper cartridges filled with black powder, but the original cartridges have a lead bullet inside that paper cartridge along with the gunpowder. You rip the paper apart, you pour the gunpowder down the barrel, then you insert the bullet and ram it with your ramrod down against the powder. Well, this cartridge that this supposed reenactor handed them actually had the lead bullet inside, unlike their own blank cartridges.
Ouch.
I wonder if they tested it to see if it was from that era.
Actually, I heard that they did, and it was apparently an original cartridge.
Wow.
Oh. So if they didn't die from the bullet wound, they died of lead poisoning. For the most part.
And those bullets they're very heavy.
Yeah.
69 caliber was, I think, the largest used at Gettysburg. 58, 55, 77 caliber. Those were the most common. Those are still huge bullets.
Oh yeah.
And they're so heavy and soft that when they would hit a body, they would spread out and cause massive destruction.
Yeah.
That would explain a lot of the amputations that would have had to have happened if that hit a bone.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Shattered
It would shatter it, and they didn't know the techniques to repair the bone. And sometimes when they would save a limb, like for instance, a leg might be 3 inches shorter than the other leg because of the lost bone.
Wow.
It was a pretty horrific experience.
See, that's...
Well, it's like in the film Gone with the Wind, one of the things that really unsettled my brother was they were showing a segment, and they're like, well, that leg's got to come off. And the guy just screaming, don't cut, as horrified as he could. It was really unsettling.
Wow.
The tough part for the Confederates, too, is sometimes they lacked any anesthesia. And they actually would, the term bite the bullet. They would place a bullet or something between the soldier's teeth to bite down on while they conducted the operation. Just, to me, that's beyond imagine.
Sure. Oh, I'd almost be preferred to be knocked out and then let them do it. Yeah.
Well, I don't think they're gonna, give you a concussion just to
No,
do that.
they wouldn't, but...
But then you realize just how brutal, combat was then, even in the Middle Ages and, Battle of Stirling, for example, where they were using broadswords, which would have been just as bad, if not worse. So,
yeah, you could have been cut bad enough to where you had to amputate. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you could see a lot of pain and suffering happen around that battlefield. Even when they were convalescing, probably, because I'm not sure how much pain medication there was back then either.
Yeah, like I know during the Civil War they did use morphine, as I understand, to dull the pain. They called it something else, and the name escapes me. But
laudanum.
Yes, I think that is the term. Yes.
They would have had opiates, I would think.
Mhm.
Yeah. But that would have been like a Union Army um, luxury. I don't much know how much the South had.
Yeah, it would be kind of hit and miss depending on what they were able to get through the blockade or what they might have captured too. I think that was a highly prized thing to capture. Like if they capture, a Union supply train, those medical supplies would be pretty sought after.
Yeah, and they fought for 3 days, and it was extremely hot in Gettysburg.
And the sad part is so many of these poor guys would be caught between the lines, and some of them might lay out in the open for a day or two before they received any aid.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people.
Slowly bleed.
Yeah, well, they couldn't venture with snipers around, going out into the open to rescue somebody.
And some people were killed trying to rescue the wounded, especially friends.
And Jeff from Ohio is saying in the chat room they used a technique called drumming. They would rapidly hit the wound until the patient would pass out from pain.
Huh.
Oh.
Yeah, that's.
It would work.
It probably
yeah.
would. Yeah.
Throw him into shock, but yeah.
And he poured in a storm, I guess.
Yeah. Hmm.
Just pour some more port, and there you go. So now, what were you like a backgrounder on Gettysburg? You weren't. Well, it wasn't like you were a consultant or anything.
Well, what we were called. They gave us a fancy term, background artists, which were sort of glorified extras. They did have regular extras that they, outfitted from the movie wardrobe. The reenactors that were hired, we would be more toward the foreground, and we also were asked to police the authenticity of things. If we saw something that wasn't right, they wanted us to speak out. One that comes to mind is one scene, one of the extras had on brown modern work boots, kind of a tannish brown, and he's laying there with his feet up in the air, and it's like, man, not very good.
No, that wouldn't have been too real, would it?
No. So that was pointed out before the next take, so he was moved to the background, so that wouldn't show.
So when you were when the film came out, you saw it? Were you able to spot yourself?
Yeah. We were pretty lucky. I was one of them that was actually employed to go to Washington for the premiere. And we set up a camp on the National Mall and did drilling demonstrations, had a camp demonstration, and actually for Sam Elliott, who played John Buford, a friend of mine and I actually served as his bodyguards for a little bit because people were bothering him.
Huh.
So we fixed bayonets and stood there, and I think Sam Elliott got a big kick out of us.
Well, yeah, because it's Sam Elliott.
Oh yeah.
and he was a rather enjoyable guy to be around.
Yeah, he's cool.
That's pretty interesting, then.
So, exactly how long have you been studying Gettysburg and the history of the battles?
Oh wow, Barbara, it's been since childhood. And the ironic part, and I'm trying to think, I don't want to repeat myself if I've shared this with your listeners before, but I was always particularly enthralled with Little Round Top. But from the Union side, the 20th Maine, Joshua Chamberlain, and that's actually what I was hired for in the movie Gettysburg, was to be a 20th Maine soldier. But ironically, for about half of a day, I got to be one of the 15th Alabama Regiment soldiers charging Little Round Top. And it was only later, because of paranormal experiences that I kept having in that area, I got to looking into it, and I found out I had ancestors in the 15th Alabama and other regiments that were present at Gettysburg. So I actually got to be a soldier in my great-great-grandfather's regiment in the movie, and I didn't know it at the time.
Wow.
So you had Was there anything in your childhood that just inspired you to read it, or you just picked up a book one day and said, "Yeah"?
Well, yeah, my mother is from Alabama. My dad was stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia, back in the Korean War era. That's how they met. And when he got out of the service, they married, but they set up housekeeping here in Ohio. But we, every summer, we would go visit family, and sometimes I would have an extended stay. And I had an uncle who was very fascinated with history, and he would take me out to some of the remnants of trenches, in the woods, and, take me, of course, to the Fort Benning, U.S. Infantry Museum. They had the Civil War Naval Museums there at Columbus, Georgia. So I was immersed in it at a very young age, and also I was aware I had family on both sides. My grandmother, my mom's mother, told me about sitting on her grandfather's lap. He was a 2nd Alabama Cavalry. So yeah, I had a very deep interest at a young age.
Wow. Yeah.
I couldn't find any of my relation in the Civil War because the last name Foister went off in so many different directions, and my great grandfather and there was 2 brothers that come over from England, and I believe it was around 1857 or something like that. So that was kind of like just before the Civil War, but I couldn't find anything whether any of them had been in the Civil War. So.
Okay, I have a big question here, which is, what was the purpose of the drummer boys during the battles? Or were they actually there on the battlefield or preceded the battles? Or was that just sort of a pop art thing?
No, they actually played a very vital role. The drum beat would determine, of course, the marching cadence. And it was a very Napoleonic style of warfare. Men, would go from columns of 4 into lines of 2, different maneuvers, the companies within the regiment, the regiments within the brigade, and that marching cadence was very important. Once the shooting started, the drummers were relieved, and then they would serve as stretcher bearers. So they were very much in the combat, although they were non-combatants.
So it was kind of like a Morse code to what to do, what formations to go off into?
Yes, it's very similar to bugle calls, and they would have both. Some would have bugles, some would use the drums, but they would serve the same purpose often.
And were these normally just younger soldiers who did this?
Not necessarily. A lot of them were younger. I know of a regiment that I've studied, a gentleman who was in his early 30s was one of the musicians with his regiment. So not necessarily, but often they were younger.
Okay, that's interesting. I learned something new today.
Hey.
I don't know. I heard about the drummer boys stuff, but it never occurred to me that they played much of a vital role in any of the battles. Was this just northern troops that had this, the armies, or did the southern armies have these as well?
No, it came from the U.S. regular army, and the Southerners copied that as well. They would even use the same books of tactics and so forth. Many of the officers were trained at West Point, from both sides. So I think a soldier could pretty well transfer from north to south or vice versa and fit very much in, with how things operated.
And we keep forgetting that West Point was operational at that point and not, it wasn't as guerrilla-styled warfare as you would think.
It was a pretty traditional training, both for cavalry, infantry, and artillery.
Yeah,
That is
and
cool.
and they when they were out in the open, you might say, they would try and shoot them just so they couldn't give communications.
Yeah, they were definitely targets, just like anybody else.
Oh, it's not like the old days when you had medics and pretty much people left the medics alone. But I guess that's not the case either.
And they did also have, especially in the North, but the South had them too, trained ambulance corps, and there were also stretcher bearers with the ambulances. So the drummer boys were, the musicians were really a supplement to that.
So when you say ambulance, you mean simply a drawn cart, right?
Yeah, and they had simple, two-wheeled carts that might hold 2 or 4 people. They had larger ones that might hold 6 or 8 patients, on racks. They put the stretchers on racks inside.
So how far would the military hospitals be located away from the fighting?
Well, they would be much, like a modern battlefield. They would have, they would provide aid right there behind the lines, and then they would go back to a closer field hospital, not far at all behind the lines, and then from there they would try to get the wounded to better quarters, even a barn or a house or, something out of the elements. But
Yeah.
They might go miles away in the aftermath of a battle to find a suitable place. They could use the ambulances to transport them, to a better spot.
Wow. So
Which,
during all these interactions and the reenactments of the battles, did anybody ever discuss with you that the soldier ghost tried to follow them home away from the battle?
I have heard of that happening at people who have visited Gettysburg. I've not heard any reenactors tell me that, but I have heard accounts of people actually looking in the rearview mirror of their car and seeing, an apparition of a soldier in the back seat.
Really?
Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one. I haven't seen one either. Thank goodness.
I have seen an apparition at Gettysburg. I might have shared that on the show here before. It was last fall, and it left me stunned.
Wow. Well, we was there last summer,
One of the
or April, I guess it was. So it was later in the fall that you seen this.
Yeah, it was in October. It'll be a year ago this coming October. And I was walking on one of the footpaths, off the roadways. I was actually going to the Slider Farm, which was the Alabama Brigade's field hospital. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man on a horse. And I just initially assumed it was one of the equestrian tours that they have. But I realized it was a solitary man and horse. But I looked closer, and it was a beautiful brown horse. I mean, as clear as could be. The horse was sweating, although it was walking slowly. It was a cool day, but the rider had on a Union uniform, short cavalry shell jacket, a slouch hat. He looked to be either totally exhausted or injured. He was slumped over. I could not see his face. I didn't see a weapon. But he had the military saddle. It was a dirty blue and white saddle blanket, military. I mean, all the details were correct, and I was stunned. And then it just vanished.
Really?
And
Wow.
I sat down. I had a camera around my neck and didn't even think to use it. I was just so stunned. But then, as I'm sitting thinking about it, there was no noise. And what I saw, this horse was in some scrub timber. And if a horse could have even passed through, it would have made a horrible ruckus. And there was total silence. I didn't hear a thing.
When was that close to the Slider Farm or back up
It was
over a hill,
if you-
kind of?
Yeah, if you're familiar, do you know where the Farnsworth
Yes.
Monument, Farnsworth? It was past that on the trail going back, but before you get to the footbridge, you're up in kind of the high area.
Oh, okay.
Before you descend down, it was right, almost the high point of that trail is where I saw it.
Wow.
I wish someone else would have been with me to verify it. I was alone, but it's like there. I still almost question myself, but it's no. I saw it, no question.
Well,
It was so vivid.
where that bridge is, it crosses that creek. If you look to the left of that, way back up on the hill, on the ridge up there, we seen, I think it was like one or two of them that looked like military. I mean, they was kind of far away, but they went riding by and off, into the distance, went like on over the hill. And they wasn't anybody supposed to be riding up there like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And that would also be in the area of Farnsworth's charge, yes. So it would be, so there were cavalrymen there during the battle fighting.
Yeah, I've been over to the Slider farm, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. And,
yeah, I have too, since that was all of my ancestors is it's rather amazing. I had a number of ancestors in, actually at least one in each of the Alabama Brigade regiments, and none of them were wounded or killed. My great-great-grandfather was captured on Little Round Top, but he was not injured.
Well, going from the Slider farm over toward, what's that hill called over there where the rocks are?
Devil's Den?
Yeah, Devil's Den. It was going over that way. There's a hill just to the left before you get up close to where the cannons were on Devil's Den. Up on that hill, there is graves from the Indians. They're burial mounds. And we went up there and seen them also.
Oh, that's interesting. I've not seen those. I'll have to check those out.
Yeah, if you go up on there's, I don't know how many different mounds there are, but they're covered in rocks and they're not allowed to be moved.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because the Indians at one time lived in that whole area, and that creek that runs through there had the fresh water, and they ended up fighting for the rights to the land for that water.
Just be careful where you stepped the last time. One time Henry was there, he was stepping on all these dead soldiers, and Cat had to tell him, stop stepping on their faces.
Yeah, that's what they told me, but I didn't see them, so.
That's like they said that the wheat field, which is near Devil's Den,
That's
the dead were so thick on that field that you could walk clear across the field and never step on the ground once, just walking the bodies.
It was slaughter in those battlefields, I tell you. Yeah. And the peach orchard was the same way. The way that they ended up fighting that, their tactics couldn't have been real good. They were spread out from units, and they couldn't get reliable information from one to the other so they could fight as a whole unit. And I think that's a lot what their problem was.
Yeah, and I don't, in today's modern society, I don't think we often think about that. And you might send off a courier who might get killed and never even reach his destination.
Yeah. Or get captured, and then they have the orders and know where
they use them against you.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting battle, though. So Antietam, which that's about 30 miles away from Gettysburg, or a little further. Might be a little further than that.
But it's not very far at all.
No, and that was that was a terrible battle there too. When we were there was a couple times when you'd be out on the field, and you would hear cannon fire, and there wouldn't be no cannons being fired, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I've heard that at Gettysburg, phantom cannon fire.
Yeah. Well, you know they got a farm on the field now that you can rent for a night, but you have to stay on the perimeter of the farm, but you can go out of the house onto the field, and there won't be anybody there, but I've heard that you can see all kinds of things up on Little Round Top and Big Round Top.
Yeah, that is a very spiritual place to me, Little Round Top.
That's where some of the rough battles are. And there's still soldiers that are buried, I guess, under rock graves and stuff like that they don't even know that they're there yet.
I know I have friends who own the old Sanders farm outside of Gettysburg, and the Park Service has told them that there's probably at least a dozen, maybe 15 unmarked Confederate graves on their property. It was a Confederate field hospital.
Wow.
But those are not to be touched, correct?
Correct. As a matter of fact, we think, I've been there with them, we think we found one, and of course it has not been disturbed, and one is marked, and it's really quite an interesting story. There's the initials. I know W is one of the initials, and the soldier's name was Walter, but it's a sad story. This soldier died at the Sanders Field Hospital. As I'm trying to think what unit he was in, they know this, but anyway, his cousin saw to it that he was buried. His cousin scratched the initials in the rock. It's not far from the house, and then he subsequently was killed in a later battle. But he had written home. And later, after the war, one of the soldiers' relatives had written to the Sanders family. And so they do know the name of the soldier. I know his first name is Walter. And the family planned on coming to retrieve the body to bring it home, but it never happened. And I know my friends the property owners would love to get a proper marker for his grave. But at least his identity is preserved.
So do you think, due to folklore, that it's true that these unmarked graves often would cause more of a haunting just because their bodies are there but unnoticed?
I know there definitely that is a theory and a thought, and yeah, it would seem to me that if and I do believe that at least part of our intelligence or spirit survives our death. I think the evidence is overwhelming that I think you would hate to be forgotten. And some of my personal experiences, I believe, are based on the very fact of not being forgotten. That people do want to be remembered or have their story told.
Yeah, I often wondered if a lot of the hauntings were just simply people trying to tug our shirt tails and say, hey, I have a story to tell you. And maybe if somebody stopped to listen to it and wrote them down, they would be more at peace.
Yeah, one of my more powerful moments, and I'll just touch on it briefly, it led to my working on my current book that I cannot finish because some of the research I need is only in paper form at the Gettysburg Archives, and those are currently closed. But I was on East Cemetery Hill, not knowing really what happened there. I was at the position of the 107th Ohio Infantry, and I all of a sudden just had a flash, like all of a sudden I was stunned. And in my mind's eye, I saw darkness and muzzle flashes and could sense screaming and confusion. And it was a number of minutes before I could even speak or move. I
Wow.
was like drained. And my friend who was with me could see, he told me later he thought I was having a stroke or something.
Huh.
He was ready to call 911. I just kind of waved him off and eventually told him I was okay. Luckily, he was understanding, so I shared with him what happened. Well, when I got home, when I did the research, I found out that what happened there is exactly what I saw in my mind's eye. The Louisiana Tigers overran that portion of the line on the second day of the battle, pushed the Union line back. The Union line rallied, got reinforcements, and retook the line. This 107th Regiment was German. They had very bad luck and also a lot of prejudice against them because they were German. Their commander was placed under arrest. Their brigade division commander basically said they were cowards. I can't imagine human beings behaving any more bravely than these guys did in that battle 2 days in a row. They were also on Barlow's Knoll the first day, and they also were on the extreme right flank at Chancellorsville and took the brunt of Stonewall Jackson's attack. They were very derisively described. They were called the Flying Dutchmen, the Running Half Moons. The Crescent Moon was their corps badge, and that's one of those cases. I believe these men wanted their story told, and that's why this happened to me. And I've uncovered all this, and I will be explaining it in my book when I can finally finish my research.
Wow.
Don, I know exactly that feeling, and that feeling of being completely drained afterwards. So I think you're right. They were just trying to get into your head and show you what they were talking about, what they were feeling.
Last fall, I took some friends there. I didn't tell them anything about the spot. It's just we were at the Jenny Wade house, and it's a very short walk from there. I had done a book signing, so we walk over there, and a friend of my friend, she all of a sudden, I took them right to the spot where I had my experience, and Linda started crying uncontrollably. And she was apologizing. She said she didn't know what. She just felt this intense sadness. To me, that was very validating to my own experience because I told them nothing when I took them there.
Wow.
Nice. So you have another book coming out again on the Gettysburg area battles.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it'll be, focusing on the 107th. I talk a little bit about their formation and earlier and later fights, but it focuses primarily on Gettysburg and somewhat on Chancellorsville and how badly they were treated, their German ethnicity, and so forth. And I'll talk about my own paranormal experiences, what led me to write the book, what led me different directions with it, and it'll be something a little different than I've ever done before.
Wow.
Now, for those people who were captured, and that I get POWs for lack of a better word, where were they shipped off to from there?
For the troops, the northern troops captured by the Confederates were those that were not paroled were sent to, the enlisted men went to Belle Isle, and the officers went to Libby Prison. Belle Isle is basically the precursor to Andersonville. My very first book is the experience of a Michigan cavalryman captured in the Shenandoah Valley who was sent to Belle Isle and kept a diary. Very horrible place to be.
Oh, it was. Generally, a lot of the people that went there ended up dying.
My soldier did. I don't like to give that away, but he basically starved to death.
Yeah.
He actually died in a hospital in Richmond, but by the time they took him there, he was too far gone to be saved. The Southerners captured some of the officers went to Johnson's Island on
That's
the Lake Erie in
Yep.
Ohio,
Yep.
and a lot of the enlisted men went either to Columbus or to Chicago POW camps.
And I have been up there and visited that place also.
Yeah, I have as well, Henry.
Yeah. Very interesting.
I had no idea Chicago had POW camps, so
Yeah,
that's
Camp Douglas was the Chicago camp. They are rebuilding some barracks, and at least a part of the camp is being preserved.
wow.
Wow. Jeff, are you still with us?
So far,
Oh, okay.
every so often I'll try and say something, but I don't know how long it'll be before Skype says, "Hey, he's saying something."
I just want to make sure you were still there. I hadn't heard anything. So, we got about another 15 minutes before we take a break. So, Barbara's asking some great questions here about Gettysburg. And you say you have been to Antietam also. Did you have or find out if any of your relationship fought at Antietam?
Yes, the Alabama Brigade, although it was configured differently, the regiments were there. My great-great-grandfather, who was captured at Gettysburg, was there, and I had a great-great-great-uncle killed at Antietam or mortally wounded. And it was rather interesting. The last time I was there, I was with my grandson, and shortly before we went, we were at a garage sale just near his hometown, not far from where I live, and I found the composite muster roll from one of the Pennsylvania regiments that fought at Antietam. It detailed their losses, and they took very heavy losses. And ironically, about that time, Civil War Times ran an article on that regiment and its experience at Antietam. They're basically raw, untrained troops thrown into battle. So I thought it would be interesting in light of all this. When we went to Antietam, we found where they fought and where they made a charge. And my grandson and I walked their path of their charge. They came up against my ancestors of the 4th Alabama.
Wow.
Now, trying to get this a little bit back to the supernatural here and or paranormal, and I'm wondering if anybody does antique buying, and especially around that area, and do you find anything attached to those antiques that might be Civil War related, or even from a newspaper?
I've heard a lot of things. Of course, there's a lot of people who actually specialize in that. I have not myself really experienced anything that I felt was an attachment to an item. The house, I feel definitely, my house has spirits attached to it, beyond doubt. But a lot of people have had experiences like that. I own a Civil War musket that I purchased actually from the soldier's grandfather's estate sale many years ago, and I was kind of confused because it had a different name carved in the stock. The soldier who had it, his last name was Partee. He was in the 68th Ohio, and soldiers were allowed to purchase their guns and bring them home. And I got to looking, but it had the name Collier inscribed in the stock. Well, lo and behold, when I looked at the information, the Collier soldier had died about a month before Partee joined the company. So, and I don't know, I was very fortunate to find that gun, and it was stuck in the barn. And they had just uncovered it. I didn't even know it was at the auction until they held it up to sell it. And I don't know. Don't know that there's spirits attached to it, but I feel a very strong connection with that piece, almost a spiritual connection.
Now, I know a lot of people don't know that you live in Bryan, Ohio.
Yeah.
And Ohio Jeff, he lives not too far from where I live right now. And he wanted to know, was there any more stories about, he said spooks, so we'll say ghosts, that maybe followed you home?
I have never felt that any followed me home. And I have done some paranormal investigating at some very active places, even some close by here. But I have never felt that. But I also have done a lot of reading, and I tend to kind of keep that in mind, and I almost kind of think about protection. I think about, sometimes picture myself enveloped in white light. There are mediums who swear, people who study the field who swear by that, and I don't know if it works or not, but it's not hurt me to do that because I've not had that experience. I've never really had what I would consider a truly negative energy that I've experienced. I've experienced some rather obnoxious ghost spirits, but not what I felt were actually malevolent.
Okay. When we were at the David Stewart farm, which is where I first met you, we was at an event there, like a little convention where everybody set up, and you was selling your book at that time. And I got the book and had you on the show, and then every time I was going to Gettysburg, you was going, and so we got to hang out quite a bit. But I got a question from Sherry. She wants to know, have you ever seen the phantom cigarettes in the barn at the David Stewart farm?
No, I have been to the David Stewart farm a couple of different times. I have not been fortunate enough to investigate there, but I have seen video footage of that. And
we did the show from there one night, and after we did the show, most everybody went out to the barn, and me and Craig was standing in the back, and I'm sitting there looking toward the far end of the barn, and most people was between me and that, and I'm seeing these little dots, 4 or 5 at a time, would glow red, and then they'd go dim, and I'm looking around to see if there's some lights shining that's reflecting off of something that's causing this, and I watched it for I don't know how long, and finally I said, does anybody else see those red dots? I thought it was just me, and every one of them said, oh yeah, we see them. I said, well, what are they? And they said, because it was a Confederate field hospital, they said it's the Confederates that are over there that's been wounded and stuff smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, to me that's amazing. And tobacco does seem to be a powerful draw for spirits.
Uh-huh.
I have been investigating at Sachs Bridge at Gettysburg, and so I was at one end of the bridge with some folks. There was another group at the other end, and they were asking, if there was any spirits there, if they wanted to take a draw on the cigarette. They left a lit cigarette, there on the railing, and lo and behold, that cigarette brightened up as if someone was taking a drag on it. That I found interesting.
Well, I would assume that that's one of their pleasures that they were able to have, so they probably would be smoking. Yeah.
Everybody forgets that tobacco is pretty much a narcotic. It will calm you down. So I'm sure that, it's probably the one vice that they had that they could readily get a hold of. I'm not sure that alcohol would have been easy to get at that time either.
Especially the officers could get it, but for the enlisted men, it could be quite tough to get alcohol.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure they probably used a lot of it to pour on wounds or make people drink it before surgery or something.
That is very true, and they would sometimes issue like a dram of whiskey, before, say, a long march or, impending battle. There were times that's been documented.
Wow. We got about 6 minutes,
That makes sense.
Barbara.
Would kind of make sense. So about that bridge, because I understand that were people hanged there?
I don't believe that story is true from some of my recent research. There's no documentation of it. The story goes that there were 3 Confederate deserters hung there, but nobody seems to be able to find any documentation. However, I have seen a photograph that does at least appear to possibly be, a semi-transparent white figure hanging from one of the rafters, but it could be pareidolia. It's not terribly clear.
Well, now, the bridge that's there now is not the bridge that was there during the Civil War. I believe that got washed away in a big flood.
Well, actually, it did, Henry, but they restored it. They brought it back.
Oh, they brought the old
in
one back?
place.
Oh, I didn't know they brought that one back over. I thought they just rebuilt it.
Now, they did have to do some, I think something like 90% of it is still original. But they did have to do a lot of repair, and they actually made it 5 feet higher to hopefully avoid being swept away again.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So what did they do with deserters? They hung them, or they just shoot them on sight, or what?
They tended to shoot them, but they would usually have a trial, and the way they did it was somewhat cruel. They would draw the regiment up into a 3-sided square, and in the open end of the square, they would dig a grave, have a wooden coffin. The deserter would be sat on the coffin blindfolded, and then he would be shot so he would fall back into his grave from the coffin.
Wow.
Pretty dramatic.
Part of that was designed to instill a fear of desertion into the others in the unit, I'm sure.
Right.
Apparently that was the judge was Rube Goldberg at the time.
That would, that's an awful way to go, I tell you. But I mean, during a time of war, any deserter that left his post or rank or whatever would either be shot or hung. Yeah. Which was a very good deterrent, I would say.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many people were in the firing squad, but it would have probably, hurt.
And I think, at least in some cases, I think they would have 7.
That's what I thought.
Firing squad, and one person would have a blank load. But I know from having fired muzzle-loading muskets, you would know if you had the blank or if you had a live load.
Right.
Okay.
Wow. I hadn't shot a musket rifle, but I've got a 1876 Navy Colt revolver that you put black powder in it, and you crimp down a ball in it, and it holds 6 shots. And then you'd have to put the cap on the cylinder and shoot it that way. And it had a good kick. It was loud, and you had to wait for smoke to clear to see if you hit anything.
That's pretty much how they work. And the smoke would get so thick in the battles that people couldn't see what they were doing or what was going on.
Yeah, with that many shooting, yes. Yeah.
And it would have been really painful to the eyes just trying to see through it, let alone, getting into the eyes and such, because it's all the particulate matter, wouldn't it be?
It's, the sulfurous smoke is, makes your eyes definitely water from reenacting. I've been in that situation where the smoke is so thick you can barely see, and it's hard to breathe.
Yes. All right, I think what we're going to do is take us a quick break, and you won't hear anything when we go out on break until I come back and start talking again. But your mic will be live, so just don't say anything. And we'll be out, 5-6 minutes, something like that, 7. Give you time to run, do whatever you got to do or whatever. So I believe, Jeff, you're going to take us out?
Yep. Yep, you're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat, Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with our guest author, Don Allison. So stay tuned for more Paranormal View after the break.